Hi, this is Cynthia Elliott for English 3 Online. I'm doing a video this time about the visual rhetoric checklist, and it would help for you to print it out or have it on your computer as I speak and explain the different components. You have two assignments. One is to look at a print ad, and I've provided 4, and you only need to look at 1, and to examine the mise en scène. You might read it as mise en scène, but mise en scène in French, and that is how objects are placed within the frame. Anyway, I'm going to go through those components, and then you have a second one to do, which will include on the checklist the cinematography and other features for a Super Bowl commercial. So for the first one, the print ad, the mise en scène portion of the checklist, which is at the top, it talks about how far away is the viewer to the subject that's being filmed. So for instance, in this small video right now where I'm talking to you, you are about 2 feet away, which would be considered an intimate distance. So a formal distance is the public distance. It's the way we view the world out in the public, or in a lecture hall, or at a performance of a play, or a poetry slam, or whatever. The next one would be your social distance, which is pretty much how far away you sit from someone in a not so crowded theater. About 3 or 4 feet away. A friendly distance means that you are close enough to someone to feel like you're connected somehow. You're in my tribe, or you're in my class, or you're in my church, or whatever the situation is. And then intimate is within 3 feet. In other words, you can touch the person, and if the people are that close, either the viewer to the object or the people within the frame, then it means that they are in some kind of relationship. It doesn't have to be marriage. It could be family, or it could be co-workers or whatever, but anything within 3 feet is called an intimate relationship. The next thing is how is the frame balanced? So the way to look at that is to think about building a pizza. And when you have your basil and your cheese and your pepperoni, I think you're probably pretty concerned about how it's balanced over the circle of the pizza. And so that's what balance has to do. If you put all the pepperoni on one side, somebody who's eating the pizza with you might be pretty concerned. So how is the frame balanced? The next one is it divided up into parts? So does there seem to be some obvious ways that subject matter in the frame, within the frame, has been divided? And I'll show you some examples of that in just one moment. Going down, are most of the lines vertical or horizontal? So in looking at this small movie, you can see that many of the lines behind me are sort of converging like this due to the way the camera lens works on these computers. And so sometimes you'll see a lot of diagonal lines, wavy lines, a lot of action. I'll show you an example of that in just one moment. The next thing you want to look at is there a foreground, a midground, and a background. So the foreground in this small movie is not there. You have the midground with me speaking in it, and the background of my office at Clovis Community College. But I'll show you some other examples. Is everything in focus? Is there anything symbolic in the frame? So I don't see anything symbolic in this small movie, but I'll show you some examples. And then what is the setting? Obviously this is present day, contemporary times. You can tell that from the way I'm dressed, from the objects behind me in the frame, but sometimes there are more obvious markers. Such as cars or music or the way people are dressed, or maybe there's some kind of historical event going on. I'm thinking of Forrest Gump, for example. When we look down at the cinematography, that has to do with how the camera's moving. And that's what we have with film, not so much with print ads. For print ads, you just use the top part of the visual rhetoric analysis checklist. The mise en scène part. For things that are films, like this one, you're going to use cinematography, and that has to do with how the camera moves. So, in other words, are there a lot of cuts? Does the camera angle change often? And commercials typically have many, many cuts within 1 minute. Are there transitions between the different cuts? Do you see a wipe, or a blurring, or a page turning, or something like that? Are there any close-ups? The closer you get to a subject, the more emotionally involved you are with them. And how far away is the camera? Is it playing the role of a participant? For example, in this short movie, you're the participant, you're that close to me. If I were very, very far away, you would be simply a witness. Or I might move this computer around so that the camera's taking a lot of different photos from around the room, and that would make you a participant. It would put you in the room with me. So that's something a little bit different. The next thing you want to look at are filters, color filters, strange lenses. Do you see a prism? That's camera flare, those kind of things. You want to listen to the music. Now, in describing the music, what I typically do is I put on the closed captioning because it will describe the music, and you can just use that if you don't have any adjectives for how to describe the music. Are there any dominant colors? I'm noticing that in this one is gray. Everything's gray. Weird. Anything significant in the set design or costumes, anything symbolic. And then you want to write down a little bit of the script in the commercial because you want to ask yourself, what kind of dialogue is this? Is it with a British accent? Is it hip-hop slang? Is it academic? Is it poetic? Is it casual? Is it scholarly? Is it silent? So a couple of different things like that. Once you've done the checklist, you want to think about what is the commercial saying socially? What is it saying about our values socially? Because every single commercial is always arguing the same thing. Buy me. Okay, that's it. That's its argument. But in order for you to be persuaded to purchase whatever it's selling, you need to share whatever social values it has put into its movie or its commercial. So it's cueing you to accept these social values. And you'll see what I mean when you look at the print ads, because they're pretty extreme. So for example, in this one, a photograph of a couple on a bed, you can see that you're at a pretty friendly distance. You're in the room with them. You're a participant. This one is a great example of framing. See those very thick black lines, and she's looking out from between them. So an example of framing, and this would also be intimate distance. We're so close we could touch her. This one is also framing. Can you see the white lines? And it really asks us to look at this cityscape in terms of each one of those squares. It's a good example of balance also, because you have the woods and the nature at the bottom, which is dark, and then the lit up buildings mostly on the top. This is one of Monet's, if you like him, and that would be an example of blurriness. And why does he want it to appear blurry? This would be an example of how you figure out the setting. So this is very old-fashioned. You can tell from the clothes and the decor and the way they're standing, the symbolic way they're standing. And so this would be a good example of how you would explain this painting in terms of setting. This, of course, is a social distance, more than 15 feet. This is Nude Descending the Staircase by Marcel Duchamp, and is a good example of the diagonal lines. This sculpture, there you go, there's sculpture of a huge spade in a park. It's symbolic. And then I think you could have a lot of fun looking at this painting and talking about how far apart all of the characters are and why they're pictured that way. So I hope this has been helpful in understanding the different components of the visual rhetoric checklist. If you have any questions, I will have a Zoom meeting this Friday from 11 to 12. You can always stop in, AC2-213, and call me, email me, let me know what you're struggling with. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye.